Good morning, and welcome to day 11 of our 31-day study of Messianic prophecy, the first advent of Jesus Christ. Today is my birthday, and the only significance to that is that I know that it is exactly 2 weeks until Christmas Day. Yesterday, we looked at an amazing Messianic prophecy that told where the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem Ephrathah, and we looked at the two Bethlehems and saw how it could only have been in that one small location. And we learned earlier that the Messiah would be born of a virgin. Now think about all of the prophecies that we have looked at so far, and how it is narrowing down the possibilities of who the Messiah could be. We have the seed of the woman of Genesis 3:15, the amazing genealogy of the Messiah from Abraham all the way down to David. The Messiah would have a forerunner, we talked about that. He would be born of a virgin, which is truly the most miraculous of all prophecies. He would have a divine father, and he would have other divine names, and his place of birth was announced. Now again, the virgin birth is so miraculous in itself, but God in his wisdom added more prophecies to go along with that one specific miracle. Now I mention all of this because today's prophecy is really something. It's just really mind-blowing how the Messiah could be rejected, and that's what we're going to talk about today. You would think with all of these prophecies that the Jewish people with 700 plus years worth of Messianic prophecy and knowledge that they would finally receive this one who they have been waiting for so long. Now remember, this is just a few. There were over 300 prophecies that spoke of the Messiah. Now, he would prevail over impossible odds and arrive in a place and a way that was foretold by the prophets. So everyone would just eagerly anticipate this glorious day with great excitement. You would think that, wouldn't you? Well, today's prophecy sadly speaks otherwise. Now I'm going to read a few prophecies or a few verses from Isaiah again. Isaiah 53:3 reads, "He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hid their face, he was despised, and we did not esteem him." Also in Isaiah chapter 50 verse 6, it reads, "I gave my back to those who strike me, and my cheeks to those who pluck out my beard. I did not cover my face from humiliation and spitting." As believers in Jesus Christ, these verses are some of the most difficult to read. Again, these verses are just part of what are called the servant songs of Isaiah, and I've referred to those many times throughout these lessons. Here they are here. I would encourage you to write these down and go through and read these if you haven't already. And if you're careful about reading two of these Messianic prophecies in particular, you're going to see a hint of where we're going tomorrow, which is very interesting. So God knew from eternity past, all the way back before our time began, that when he sent his Son into this world, he would be rejected. Now the very first prophecy that we studied, or if you remember that, it was Genesis 3:15. It spoke of the serpent striking at the heel of the seed. The Messiah would suffer, and he would in fact die, but we all know the end of the story, the hope that we have in the person of Jesus Christ and his victory over death. So today, we need to reflect on this tragedy of his rejection. Because sadly, people are still rejecting the Messiah today with all of this evidence, this undeniable evidence of who the Messiah truly is. He is still denied today. Now, we're not even done studying the prophecies, or their fulfillment for that matter, which are clearly given in Scripture, but yet people still deny their Messiah. So today's reading, if you would, I would really encourage everyone to read this section. Isaiah 52 verse 13, that's where that suffering servant begins in Isaiah chapter 52, verse 13, all the way through Isaiah 53. Now this chapter is so clearly messianic. It couldn't be speaking of anything other than the Messiah who would come into the world. Even the Jewish rabbis believed that Isaiah 53 was clearly speaking of their Messiah. Well, around the year 1100 AD, Rabbi Rashi, maybe some of you have heard of Rabbi Rashi, he decided that this chapter, Isaiah 53, better fit the identity and the sufferings of the Jewish people rather than the identity of the Messiah, much to their detriment, I might add. But in this chapter, what do we learn about the Messiah? In verse 2, we know that he would be a tender shoot from dry ground. Also, I want to read Isaiah 11:1, which corresponds to this verse. Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. What these verses here are telling us is that the tribe of Judah, the tribe of David, had been reduced. It had become poor. In the fulfillment portion, we'll discuss some of this about how, if you recall, the sacrifice that Mary and Joseph made were of 2 doves. That was the bare minimum that you could make as an offering. They were poor. So the tribe of Judah, the tribe of David, had been reduced, but from dry ground a tender shoot rises, which would be the Messiah. He would receive very little attention. He would have no exceptional outward beauty. You'll see in the Isaiah 53. Nothing that would draw men to him. And this is such a clear description of what people want versus what God actually delivers for his people. If you remember King Saul, all the people loved King Saul. He was a head taller. He was handsome. All of that kind of stuff. People looked to Saul's beauty and not to what he truly was as a person. But even today, people respect those with pomp and circumstance, those who have money or those who have fame, and those with poverty, those out of poor circumstances, are greatly ignored, much like the Messiah was. But Messiah's simplicity, his humility, his poverty, and his lowliness added to his rejection. But let me ask this. Would it take more faith to believe in a glitzy, glamorous king or a lowly servant? Messiah's entrance into the world would require true faith to believe in this lowly servant of God, not a fabricated loyalty like what King Saul received. So today, this prophecy is truly amazing. Many great scholars have spent their life studying Isaiah chapter 53. Now, we'll look more into this prophecy when we study the fulfillment portion later on in this month. And if you are not a believer in Jesus Christ, or if you know someone who is not a believer in Jesus Christ, I would encourage you or your friend or loved one to read this chapter. And ask yourself, after reading this chapter, who is this speaking of? And how can I deny the one who this chapter is clearly speaking of? Isaiah spoke of Messiah's death and how he would die 700 years before he came. And he described the type of death, the crucifixion, 300 years before it was even used. And that in itself is quite amazing. Many prophecies that we have gone through are from the book of Isaiah. I'm sure you've noticed that. And Isaiah is actually called the 5th gospel because of its great messianic message that it has. But rightfully so, Isaiah should be called the 1st gospel because it was written years before Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. So I pray that you take the time today to read this for yourself, this amazing prophecy. It's very somber, it's very difficult to read, but we do know that there's a happy ending to this. It's not all doom and gloom. God always has a purpose for his action. And tomorrow we're going to begin to see his master plan unfold to the world's benefit in having the Messiah suffer. So tune in tomorrow and take a look at that. And thank you again for watching. And please read Isaiah 53 and share that with someone you love. Thank you for watching.